Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we're going to have a really interesting show today on after-death communication. I know this is a really interesting topic to a lot of people. But before we get started on the show, I wanted to remind you that my new book, Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating, written by myself and my partner, Dr. Frank Powers. As many of you know, my husband died 3 years ago, and I was going to write a book for widows, and I ended up going online and I met Frank. And he's a psychologist for many years, and we decided that we would write a book together called Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating, because as the Surgeon General has told us, loneliness is one of the major problems in America today. And for those of you who are looking for love, you can get our book on Amazon, and it's going to give you our story plus advice and tips and tools if you want to reach out and try to find a partner yourself. And I also want to remind you that 100% of the proceeds for this book will go to the Open to Hope Foundation with a mission of helping people find hope after loss. So Heidi, I'm excited about this show. Do you want to get on and introduce our guest and all that?
Sure, Mom. And as you said, we will be talking today about after-death communication, which is a topic that many people out there are interested in. And our guest today is Graham Maxey. Graham is a licensed professional counselor. He is the clinical director for the Center for Grief and Traumatic Loss and a trainer in the induced after-death communication therapy technique. Graham is the featured induced after-death communication therapist in a new PBS documentary film called Life with Ghosts, The Healing Power of After-Death Communication. Welcome to our podcast, Graham.
Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate it. Really do enjoy being with folks that know what we're doing here, and you obviously do.
Well, we want to hear more. I'm sure you know a lot more about it than we do, and we're excited to delve into this realm with you. So,
Sure.
you know, we were talking, you and I, and we're talking a little bit before the show, and I said we have so many people who are interested, are Open to Hope listeners, in anything that has to do with after-death communication. And I said, I think it's because so many people have had it, right?
They really have. It's underreported, and but the statistics, when you find them, are very robust. Very, you know lots of people who have had after-death communication, whether they talk about it or not. Almost 50% of widows and widowers will have had at least one after-death communication from their spouse that they are convinced is from their spouse. And that is a wide range of things. You know, it could be, I had one client, or almost client, call me up for IDC therapy. And I said, well, I'm currently not taking new patients right at the moment, but I will let you know in a couple of weeks whether I get an opening or not. And he called me back the next week and said, I don't think I need it anymore. I said, really? What happened? He said, my wife appeared to me in my kitchen. And I said, appeared to you? And he said, yes, I saw her. I think he said head to knees. And she told me some things that I'd only dreamed about. And the upshot is that it's out there, but our society really doesn't want to know about it. We're kind of hesitant to talk about it, and anything you don't hear a lot about, even if you have experiences, we kind of file those away in places that say, well, that may not have been important, or I don't want to think about that because that kind of makes me more lonely when people back off from me. But and that is very sad because it takes away some of the excitement that says my relationships are not transitory. They are part of who I am and always have been.
So Graham, I'm wondering, how did you even get interested in this?
Well, I'll tell you the story. I've been a licensed professional counselor since 1983, but I met my now wife in 1990. And on our third date, I took a book over to her apartment that I thought she'd find interesting. She picked up the book and said, "This isn't your book." And I said, "Well, it was given to me by a friend." "Was your friend left-handed?" "Yes." "Did he shoot himself in the head?" "Yes." "Was his name Don?" "Yes." "Was he married to Barbara?" "Yes." "Well, Don's here and he wants you to tell Barbara that there is another note that she hasn't found yet." And so I called Barbara and told her where the note was. She found it. And that 30-second interchange, kind of changes your life pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Totally unexpected, but it kind of dovetailed with some things that I had been considering for a while. Working in a psych hospital at that point, I had a 12-year-old come in. And the reason he was in the hospital was that his parents were divorcing, and he was heard, and he actually talked about speaking with his deceased grandmother in the bedroom. And on the basis of that, they hospitalized this kid.
Wow, that's awful.
Put him on some, Zyprexa and some other medications that were, for a 12-year-old, that's pretty heavy duty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there watching this kid for a while on the unit. Didn't exhibit any kind of psychotic behavior, and nothing, and it dawned on me, if your world is coming apart as a 12-year-old and your parents are divorcing and you need some support, what's a grandmother going to do?
Right.
She's going to come and tell you, hey, it's going to be okay. You're not alone. That kind of stuff.
My son died 40 years ago, and we have found dimes around forever. And then my husband passed away 3 years ago, and we find dimes in very random places that you wouldn't find them, on cab seats, in a helicopter once on the ground. And I had a particularly stressful time a few months ago, and I found one in the middle of the sidewalk walking down the street. So I think that there are a lot of people have those little signs. I know people want bigger signs. I mean, how do I do this?
The real key to the IDC procedure, it's not magic, but what we do is bore in on what Dr. Botkin called the core sadness of the experience. And we use bilateral stimulation, and that in itself is kind of a miracle, because that is most effective tool I've ever found. Bilateral stimulation is stimulating alternately both sides of your body in some form or fashion, rhythmically, while they are concentrating on a particular sensation or memory. And what we've found is that brings down the intensity of the emotion dramatically within a very short time. We'll have people do what we call butterfly tapping.
So crossing your hands and tap right to left. Yeah.
The first part of the therapy is getting the person to tell their story, which is actually therapeutic in itself. A lot of people don't have the chance or the opportunity with the people around them to even say, this is what happened to me and this is how I feel about it, which is those are the first two tasks of successful grieving, is to well, to realize that it has happened. There's a certain amount of unreality about that for a period of time. Second is to feel how you actually feel about that, because a lot of people push away feelings, particularly bad ones. And the third is to get it out of your mouth. When we get that narrative done, I'm looking for what is the apex of that sadness, that core sadness that we talked about. What's the saddest memory that you have? What's the biggest trigger for the anxiety, the despair, the really bad stuff that comes up? What Dr. Botkin found was that once you find the top of that pyramid, take the time to process that bilaterally, all the rest of them kind of subside underneath it. So you don't have to take them one at a time. So that's what we're looking for. What we find is that when people have a substantial reduction in those feelings, they are able to notice what's already there, which is the person that they're grieving. My analogy is, if I told you all to go outside and look at the North Star right now, you'd say, well, I can't see it because the sun's out. When you wait until dark, when the sun is not obvious, you can see what's been there all day long. The North Star is not going anywhere. So we're just letting you, the client, be in a state where you can receive what's already in motion or in vicinity for you.
I like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've heard people say that, in really, really heavy grief, it's hard to make any attachment at that time because you can't notice.
Well, it is. Yeah. That comes later, when I started counseling, the template was you have to let people, or have to get people to decathect from their loved ones, and then they're able to go on, have them write goodbye letters and stuff like that. People don't want to do that, and they're not good at doing that. That's like, taking out the daily trash and putting it on the corner, and that just doesn't feel right. One of the tasks is finding a way to continue the relationship on another basis.
Mhm.
And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. People do it all the time. They plant trees and they do scholarships, and they, some way of connecting with that loved one.
Yeah.
But this one's pretty simple.
A continuing bond. I remember, this brings up something for me, because I remember when my father-in-law died, my son, who was, I don't know, 4 or 5 at the time, he used to say to us, Mommy, when I play in my bedroom, Grandpa watches me.
Sure. Yeah, you heard lots of stories like that about children. They're not censoring their experience. They're telling you what they're going through. And my first experience with that was my mother. My grandmother had passed away, and I saw Mom one morning, and she looked kind of strange. And I said, "Well, Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "I had a dream about your grandmother last night. She was in the house with suitcases." And I asked her, "Well, Mom, why are you here?" And she says, "I've come to get Elizabeth, my aunt." And 3 hours after that, we got a call from Florida that Elizabeth, in the depths of her bipolar disorder, had jumped off a bridge.
Wow.
And I asked Mom about that, 10 years later, because nobody in the family talked about it. I said, "Do you remember that dream?" And she said, "What dream?" And I said, "The one where Grandma came and told you about Elizabeth." And she just screwed up her face and said, "Oh, that was just a crazy dream." nobody had talked about it, so it got demoted in any kind of importance or relevance to life, which I thought was kind of a shame at that point.
I was from a religious community where people believed in an afterlife. And so there was more openness in my community to actually talk about it, which I don't hear people doing now, but people used to kind of testify and have testimonials about, they think more. If I want to have this experience, give me a couple of things that I could do now.
Find people or take journaling seriously. I mean, that's the thing that kicked off my friend Luann Mayer with her book. She had lost her mother, she had lost her daughter very quickly, one after the other, and she was going back to the things that she knew from her own experience as a Catholic. And she said, I use centering prayer, I used meditation and journaling. And that's the order she took it in. And pretty soon she started noticing that her journaling took on a different quality, that she was getting things that she said, well, I wouldn't have said that. And that kind of mirrored things I had noticed early on. You do have to talk about or write about the experiences that you're having. You can't just do it. My mantra is nobody successfully grieves alone.
Right.
You have to have support. You have to have a venue, for processing what's going on inside of you. All after-death communication is spontaneous. It's not, it's not on demand. In Botkin's book, he talks about having a client who he thought had a particularly good connection with his deceased brother. And he said, do you mind if I ask him a question? He said, sure. And he said, what does he think about the IIDC method? And they did another set. And the client said, well, my brother says he thinks it's fine, but just remember, we're in charge of it, not you. And that's good news for us therapists. We're not on the hook at that point to make anything happen, although we're just setting the stage for them to show up, basically.
So Graham, has anybody that's passed to the other side ever said anything negative that maybe people didn't want to hear, or is it maybe positive messages that they're given?
I have never experienced, I've been doing this method since 2006. I have never heard anybody come across and say, you know how pissed I used to be at you? I'm still pissed, that has never happened. What has been the rule, is always the rule, is now I see where I am in this disagreement that we had, and I am uncomfortable with it. I would like to, reunite in this in some way with you. Even if you're not ready to do that, I'm here. That's the kind of messages that come through repeatedly.
Right. That we need to get ready to receive those messages.
Yeah.
And see that North Star. Yeah, I love that. Well, tell us about what you're doing, and now do you do private practice on
I do
Zoom?
private practice. I'm one of two trainers in North America for IIDC. This film is coming out. They're going to air it on PBS this year. It's a documentary about a comparative outcome study that they did at the University of North Texas back in 2015 to 2017. I trained all the therapists that were taking part in that study. And they had one particular client, she'd lost her husband. And I worked with her and they filmed that particularly. It makes a lot of difference for people to include ongoing connections with their loved ones in the quality of their grief, in the ability to get through grieving. not just for, complex or difficult grievings, but in all cases, basically. Life with Ghosts. And yeah, and it does have a website up, lifewithghostmovie.com, and you can see the trailer, and actually I think you can rent it at that point from the producer.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. It really is good to be with you guys.
I mean, I could go on with my own stories of, over the years. So
me too.
And Heidi, I'm sure could too.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for this really important conversation. And thank you for helping people learn to continue bonds with those that they love and to find hope after loss.
Thank you all for your contributions and your wonderful website and all the work you're doing.
And we want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.